And welcome to the program on this Thursday. Thanks for joining us. This is Weather and Ag in Focus. Meteorologist Justin Storm, Ag Director Bridgette Readel, other meteorologist Dean Wysocki, sound and visual engineer Addison. We got all sorts of fun people running this program today. Again, we thank you for joining. If you want to be a part of the conversation today, feel free to give us a call anytime, 701-293-9000. Again, that studio number is 701-293-9000, or emails to the program, that's weather or ag at flagfamily.com, as well as all the viewers over there on Facebook and YouTube Live. Guys, what's going on today? Happy Thursday. We've made it until 1:08 so far today.
Friday Eve.
It is a Friday Eve. Bridgette, what's going on? I see you're on a location again in the driver's side of a Chevy Silverado 150 Tundra Dodge.
That one.
There we
Yes,
go.
that's absolutely the right description.
Right
I'm in Bismarck. It is the North Dakota Stockmans Association's annual meeting that started yesterday. And so I'll be a part of that this afternoon. This morning was policy meetings where they talked about things like landowner rights and fencing and boundaries and so forth. And then this afternoon will be the Cattlemen's Educational Series. A lot of those presenters will be folks that are from NDSU. And so look forward to visiting with their staff all about livestock production. They might be talking about things from virtual fencing to the new ear tag regulations that are coming out, and not really a big change in those, but just how to go about doing them and so much more.
Right on, and I believe you're getting a little information on a couple of those proposed dairy plans, one of them down there in Richland County.
Yeah, I'm working with the Department of Ag to have a meeting with them. Unfortunately, I had a little snafu in the schedule, but I'll work that out and make sure we get what we need from them.
Right on. We'll get all sorts of fun information, and then we'll bring it home and talk about it.
Absolutely.
Right on. Dean, I'm surprised to see you here. It's not raining and you're not on the golf course. What's going on? Are the tee times all booked up for the day? Or all right, and Dean's out the door.
There he goes.
So we'll see Dean at some point. He must have forgot that his tee time was coming up here soon. 1:30, he says. All right. Well, Dean, best of luck. Best of luck. We got some fun things coming up on the show today. Our guest, Dr. Andrew Friskop from NDSU, will be talking about vomitoxin in wheat. I got no idea what this is, so we're going to learn a little bit more about vomitoxin and the importance of it and how it can kind of be a bad thing, is what I've been told. Also, some of the topics we'll be running down, of course, a little bit about livestock biosecurity and hoof disease in cattle. We got a couple from days past that we'll probably throw in there as well. We'll try and sneak in here. But Bridgette, what's been your takeaway so far down there in Bismarck through the morning meetings?
Well, actually, I haven't even had a chance to get to those yet. There's still plenty of things that have to get done here in Bismarck, but folks are going to continue to come on in for the day. And I think the highlight will be yet this afternoon when there's the educational series, and then, of course, this evening for their banquet. Tomorrow morning, there will be further meetings that everyone attends. You know, nobody has a convention and then is short on the amount of things that need to get covered for business. And additionally, over their noon luncheon tomorrow, there will, in fact, be a award ceremony for those who have received scholarships for college education from the Stockmans Foundation. And then tomorrow night, they have another dinner. And part of that is the awards for their top hand, environmental stewardship, and so much more, because North Dakota Stockmans wants to make sure to recognize folks who do a great job in this industry.
Right on. And we'll run down the forecast here for anyone wondering what the weekend's going to be looking like. It does look like it will be a little bit of a windy one as we head into your Saturday, but overall the weekend not bad. And for the most part, it's going to be a dry weekend as well. Right now we're seeing a little more cloud cover than sun, and we'll kind of bounce around a varying sky cover or cloud cover for the day. A few times or some points throughout the day it will be more clouds than sun like right now, and at others there will be more sun than clouds. So as a whole, let's just call it partly cloudy. Temperatures right now are sitting mild, about where they should be this time of year at 74 degrees, but windy. South winds 23, gusting to 26 miles an hour. And we'll see those winds bouncing around 15 to 30 miles per hour as we head throughout the day, but eventually those winds will start to lighten up as we head into our evening and towards the overnight hours. We'll top out in the upper 70s today, drop down to a low in the upper 50s for tonight, with mainly clear skies, west winds. Down here in the southern valley, about 5 to 15, gusting to 20. Up in the northern valley, about 10 to 15, gusting to 30. So a little windier up to the north along the Canadian border for tonight. But as a whole, tomorrow, most of us will be dealing with just a subtle breeze, about 10 to 15 miles per hour. It's mostly sunny for your Friday afternoon. Temperatures, once again, will be in the upper 70s. And as we head through Friday night, a few spotty showers are going to track across the valley. I think for the most part, we'll probably stay dry here around the FM Metro, but up in the northern and points south of the FM Metro, we'll probably see a few spotty showers as they head throughout the day. Drop down to a low in the upper 50s for your Friday night. And into the weekend, the winds ramp back up on Saturday, go to the northwest. We'll top out right at 70 degrees for the afternoon, so stuck in the 60s throughout most of the day, and we'll stay in the mid to upper 60s for Sunday with lighter wind, partly cloudy skies, a little more cloud cover on your Sunday than your Saturday. But all in all, not too bad of a forecast there, Bridgette. And as we look into next week, we'll start to warm things up a little bit, but for the most part, right now it looks like we'll be staying in the 70s with overnight lows in the upper 40s to mid 50s.
Things are moving right along as far as a nice fall, and it's great to see it. Now, I think folks in certain portions of our state, especially up in the north central part, are really glad to see that rainfall has backed off for a little bit. They've kind of had plenty, and where I'm at out in Bismarck, things still look okay. It means they've had rainfall from time to time, but I don't want to say that they're either. I think they're about probably one of the spots that's probably doing best right now. Not overly wet, not overly dry. And we'll learn more about our cornfield for our Here We Grow project tomorrow. We're going to talk about that with Dairyland Seed. And in fact, I know there are representatives from Dairyland out checking the corn for us today. One of the nice things about this is kind of staging. Where are we going to be for harvest? Are we coming up to that fairly soon? Are we not quite ready yet? What does our corn really look like from a professional's point of view? And I'm looking forward to having that chat tomorrow too.
It is indeed going to be a fun conversation and see what everything looks like. I know we have another video that'll be coming out here soon on our Here We Grow project. If you want to follow, go ahead, Bridgette.
I think it went up today.
Oh, did it now?
Shall I find a link and send it to you?
Well, we'll just open it up and we'll just search for Weather and Ag in Focus right now. That's all you got to do on the old YouTube or Facebook. And find the page and give it an old click. And there you go. Here We Grow Season 2. You scroll all the way down. No, it did not go up today.
Okay.
But it should be up within the next day or two.
Probably. And I saw the sneak peek of it today, so that's what I just sent you.
Oh, there it is. So yes, it'll be getting published later today. It hasn't been published yet, but it looks like it is uploaded, so it's ready to go.
The fun here is being able to give everybody something to look forward to about new videos.
Indeed. That's going to be a good one. I'm actually looking forward to listening to this one. What are you doing? You're watching.
I'm watching
the video.
Is it coming through?
Apparently,
I can't. It is.
No, it's just on Dean's laptop, and it's super loud in the background.
What are you doing?
Goodness.
I could make that. I could change that tea time back to. I had to change it to 2:20 now.
Yeah, that's all right.
I could keep it at 1:20 and get out of here.
I'm just glad we reminded you, Dean.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. You were like, oh God, yeah. Crap. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I got a jet to see you guys.
Jet out of here. All right, well, let's see. We got the American Ag Network coming up. Our guest, Dr. Andrew Friskop, NDSU. He'll be joining us in just a few moments, talking about vomitoxin. If you got any questions, I know I do. Feel free to email them, weatherorag@flagfamily.com. We'll read your questions for you. If you want to get on the line and join the conversation, we encourage that, 701-293-9000. And otherwise, you can just send Bridgette some personal messages as well. I know that she'll answer or get your questions answered that way as well. But like I said, we'll get caught up with the American Ag Network here. When we come back, we'll have Dr. Andrew Friskop talking about vomitoxin.
Welcome to Weather and Ag in Focus, and thank you for joining us. It's fabulous to have you with us today. And to our sponsors, folks like Steffes Group, because they're part of the auction group that makes sure that any online auctions, you're ready for them. So feel free to check out steffesgroup.com. Red River Retention Authority. We've had Brian on, and he'll join us once again next week. Always great questions for Brian, especially on current dam rehabilitation, and there's a pile of dam jokes to go with it. And Gowan Company. We had Marcia Van Leer with us even earlier this week, and we talked about Affiance fungicide. We also talked about a number of products such as Sonalan that we could be using here in the fall for weed control before we get to next year. So speaking of next year or year-on-year things that happen, some of that can be disease in crop. And we have a guest with us today who can help talk about it. That's Dr. Andrew Friskop from NDSU. And Dr. Friskop, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I appreciate the invite and talking about a subject that's really appropriate for the lunchtime hour.
Well,
That was our first question.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
What in the world is vomitoxin?
Yeah, what animal makes that?
Yeah,
understand
vomitoxin.
the guys just like to say the name, so they don't really care what it is as long as they can continually say vomitoxin.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, you can get T-shirts made for this too, I'm sure. But yeah, so when I describe vomitoxin, as the name kind of implies, if you break it down, it is a toxin. This one's produced by a fungus associated with Fusarium head blight or scab. And the reason why we worry about it is it does induce vomiting in animals and in humans. And because of that, we have to regulate it and make sure that we have safe food to eat.
Who would have guessed?
Okay.
Where does this come from? How does this rear its ugly head, I guess you could say?
Yeah, the how-to factor. So not to bore you with the scientific details, but what I look at is we have this fungus called Fusarium graminearum. It's out there. It's everywhere. Every county, probably every county in the U.S., right? And it produces spores. And when it produces spores, it's looking for a host. And in our great state of North Dakota, our hosts are the small grains. Wheat, barley, durum, winter wheat, rye, you name it, all of them can get it. The time it infects is at flowering. And once it starts infecting, 10 to 14 days later, it's starting to cause yield loss. And while it's causing yield loss, it's just releasing this toxin. So it's like a yield loss disease. But probably the more concerning thing, and Bridgette could probably comment on this too, is when you harvest and everything is high optimism, you take it to the elevator, now you're starting to get docked and you start to get rejected because something you can't see, but it's there.
You can't test for it before you harvest it?
We have to test for it.
Okay.
So the time you test for it is after harvest. You take grain samples, and there's many methods out there, and we measure it on a parts per million basis. So like the key values at the elevator is a 2 part per million. You get above 2 parts per million, you start seeing dockage, and at some levels, usually, you're going to see rejection. The reason why 2 parts per million is chosen is our finished food products have to have less than 1 part per million, and when we're milling and we're baking bread, we can, if you take on something with 2, you can get it down to a 1 just in the natural process. So like 2 is the magic number. In the coffee shops, local bars, you're going to hear 2 points a lot of times. I was below 2 points or 2%, but it's kind of the same thing. We always test for it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Okay, so the whole origination of this question really came from a listener in central North Dakota. And that listener said, I've never seen it so bad. Why? So any place you want to start with that conversation? What was it? We have that accumulation of spores and we were just ripe to have it happen. Is it just due to the heavy moisture we had in May and June? What's our symptomology?
Yeah, what's the indicators, right? So when we look at plant pathologists, we have something called a disease triangle. Super really difficult to understand. We have environment, a pathogen, and a host. It's only 3 things you got to think about. We have the pathogen, we have the host. The one big driver of just about every plant disease we have in North Dakota, the weather. And if you want me to blame something, Bridgette, I'm always going to blame the weather. But
I do every day. It's fine.
But specifically for this disease, for it to occur and the vomitoxin to be producing, you're looking for high relative humidity, and you're looking for warm temperatures. I know that's relative, so 75, 85 degrees. And the most important time is when the 10 to 14 days prior to flowering and throughout the grain maturity process. So what you just said, our relative humidity, if you go back to look at the growing season, started to ramp up in the late June into early July. And that's when we see that relative humidity hold, you have longer dew points. That's kind of creating that perfect window for some Fusarium infection.
So it's a short window, relatively speaking. A couple weeks, it sounds like?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at that. So you see planting date differences along with that too. And you might always hear the common adage of, getting rain or getting too much moisture at the wrong time. And you'll see these peaks and spores infecting. And there's been millions of research into this disease through the U.S. Wheat and Barley Scab Initiative. And that's why we have a better understanding of when the spores are releasing, what conditions you need for infection. So if you have a listener out in central North Dakota, start going back to see when did you start, when was your crop starting to head into flowering, and start looking at those environmental conditions. That's one part. The other thing is, what host are you growing? Is it a susceptible variety? Does it have resistance? Are you using fungicides? And that's how you can start dialing on, answer the question, why did I see it so bad this year? And none of them are so easy as that, and that's kind of what makes my job a little bit fun, is to try to help navigate the problem, but try to find some solutions.
Okay, you mentioned something about varieties that are tolerant to disease like that. Is it commonplace? Is that part of NDSU's breeding program, that's some research you're working on? What does that look like for us?
Yeah, so our number one tool for any disease, and specifically Fusarium head blight or scab or the vomitoxin, we'll just say all three of them today, is host resistance. I work really well collaboratively with our public breeders, both in North Dakota and also in Minnesota. And we look to make sure that there are disease-resistant varieties coming out. What I call the situation we're facing right now in the state is if we look at our top 10 varieties that are popular or commonly grown, 4 or 5 of them would be considered susceptible, and they're covering quite a bit of acreage. So my joke is I'm not doing my job good enough to education and awareness. But the thing is, we do have a lot of available varieties that are resistant. You can certainly choose them. I know there's other factors other than disease, but they exist. The public institutions definitely put a high priority on disease resistance.
Once you have vomitoxin, or if you think you have Fusarium head blight, etc., can you stop it in its tracks? Because there's plenty of fungicides out there, but does that mean that they're going to work as a curative?
Yeah, we don't have that, ointment, right, that we can get rid of a disease on a plant. Everything we do from a management, it has to be preventative. So before we even see the spores, before even we see anything on the plant, we start applying fungicides. And our timing is at early flowering, and that's because we know that's when the infection's occurring. So we do the best we can. Fungicides give us 50 to 60% suppression, which is good, helps us out, but in some cases it might not be enough. And once you have scabby kernels and once you have vomitoxin, handling that grain, you can certainly clean it. That can help reduce some of the vomitoxin levels, get rid of these, what we call scabby kernels. They're lightweight, called tombstone. They can get kicked out. But the more problematic, and what I'm hearing more conversations on now, is when we had that, and there's been several instances, but you get that 4 to 6 inches of rain, then you get that fog for several mornings, and the wheat was left out there for too long, though people are thinking sprout damage and maybe some sooty mold. The thing is, the Fusarium fungus will just reactivate and keep growing, and it'll colonize a healthy kernel, and you may see no yield loss, but the vomitoxin is there. So those are some of the kind of the frustrating things, and we've seen that for the last 30 years in the state with some of those situations.
It's the disease that won't go away.
Is this only something that will affect the living grains, or once, let's say, like wheat, if you cut their, I guess, if it's already cut, do you have to worry about it if it's still wet at that point, if it hasn't already started growing?
Yeah, so the kind of simple answer to that is yes. When it's actively growing, it can infect and take advantage of the host tissue, but we call it an excellent saprophyte, meaning that think of it like mold on a log, right? Like if you have dead tissue there and you see fungus just kind of colonize, Fusarium will do the same thing. That's a critter. It's trying to survive. It's trying to do the best it can to make it to the next year, and unfortunately, we just have a wonderful environment for Fusarium to be growing in our state.
Is it very prevalent across other states as well, or is it mainly focused up here in the northern plains?
So you can find scab and vomitoxin problems just about anywhere where small grains are growing. It can also impact corn as well. So it's kind of that grass host or cereal crop host. So it's everywhere.
Okay.
We've generally seen the most problematic epidemics back in the early 1990s into the early 2000s, and as recent as 2008 or 16 and 15. But we tend to get hit with it a little bit harder here up in North Dakota, and that's because of all the acreage of small grains and a lot of dedication of, in some states they treat wheat as a crop and we treat it as the crop. So, I mean, that's kind of another way to look at it.
Okay. Well, I know we got more questions. Bridgette, I know you're getting sent a bunch on your phone there. We're getting a few in the email inbox as well. And if you got questions yourself and you want to call in, make sure you we get your question answered. You give us a call, 701-293-9000. Email is weather-or-ag@flagfamily.com. Comment boxes there on Facebook, YouTube Live, Bridgette's personal phone. We're not giving out our numbers yet, Bridgette. Sorry. So they're all going to go to you for today.
Okay.
But we're
fine.
speaking with Dr. Andrew Friskop from NDSU, talking about vomitoxin, what is it, what it leads to, and all sorts of fun stuff revolving around that, kind of how it originates. And again, feel free to ask any questions if you got them yourself. We're going to get caught up with bottom of the hour local news, and we'll be right back in just a few short moments.
Hey, welcome back to Weather Nag in Focus. Hope you're having a great afternoon, and we're glad to be a part of it as well. Don't forget to mark your calendars. Coming up on October 12th, that will be the Beerfest 2024. You can join all of us from Flag Family Media for the Beerfest at Fargo Billiards. I hear registration is going to start at about 11. I think the Bison play at noon, and this is sponsored by Shiner, Kugel, Castle Danger, and Voodoo Ranger. Beers to sample, a Stein hoisting contest. I can't wait to see what that is. I mean, is this just
Can we compete
like
in that?
This is going to be a fun little party.
There's a party. Here's Bridgette in her blender. Glad she could make it.
Guess I won't need that this time. Oh, but there'll be
Arr,
food
matey.
too. So don't forget to join us on Saturday, October the 12th. And also on our Facebook page, you can give us your predictions of what our yield will be for our Here We Grow corn crop. We'll know more as we get closer to harvest, but don't forget to let us know how much you think it's going to weigh in at. We'll have rain gauges or grain gauges from IntelliFarm ready to share. Our guest today is Dr. Andrew Friskop. Andrew is a North Dakota guy, so you're kind of familiar with all of this disease triangle that we host up here. Question for you, though, is with the amount of disease amount of vomitoxin specifically we had in small grains this year, what do you think it's going to look like for next year? Is that something that we can talk about, or do we have to wait to see further weather? Do we just think that there's such a high potential for infestation rate? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the cop-out is it depends, right? I think that's how I always look at it. But if you want to look at factors into next year, there's a couple things you can think about. When I see, we'll just say in some areas that have a little bit wetter environment in the fall here, and it's a little bit warmer too, it's possible that the Fusarium fungus can multiply and survive a little bit better, and it might increase our risk for next year. So we have more of that pathogen part of that triangle, right? But the bigger thing is we kind of wait and see until what's May and June and kind of the 4th of July. That's kind of the key time I start looking at. So you can look at long range models and kind of get an idea if we're going to be in for a wet. But generally, when I talk to most growers, and specifically with Fusarium head blight or vomitoxin management, at least pencil in a fungicide. And it might have to make that permanent depending on what the growing season throws at you.
Is this something that can overwinter, or does it kind of die off in the winter and then it just kind of blows back up with the winds in the following spring? So it's not really as soon as we warm up, we're dealing with it. It takes a little bit for it to come back.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we do have some pathogens that can blow up from the south, and we always blame our southerly neighbors. But this one, we're married to it. It loves an environment, and actually it loves our winter because it needs a little bit of a cold snap before it to more or less be able to produce spores the next year. So,
Sure, okay.
yeah, once you have it, and you can find it everywhere. And just because I've just kind of explained it why you can find everywhere, I purposefully in my landscaping, I planted a susceptible wheat variety in the middle of West Fargo, and I can get scab every year, and I'm not surrounded by any type of production agriculture.
You're the test site for it.
Yeah, sentinel plots, right? I mean, my wife loves it.
Yeah. And speaking of research, such as what you're doing, did having a high rate of disease make research easier for you, or did that hamper some of the studies you were trying to work on?
So this year we had what I call a banner year for disease trials, and that's my perception of it, right? I don't want that to ever happen in a grower's field, but we had more disease than we probably had hours to rate. We have scab trials or these vomitoxin trials positioned all the way across the state. I think we have 7 locations extending here from Fargo out to Nesson Valley down to Hettinger. Just try to get a really nice wide capture of data, but also to look at disease epidemics. And for the most case, I would say that we hit about 80% success in our scab trials, which could be an all-time high for my program.
I mean, it's success for you, but as you said, there are some growers out there that feel a lot less successful due to disease this year.
Yeah, and I got asked the question yesterday. It was, what do you think the scab levels were this year compared to historically? And I right away, if I look at the state, right, if you take every county in the state, I would probably say it was an average year, but it was pretty devastating on some of the local county levels. And I'm still getting reports in. they're figuring out what to do with their grain. They had sprout issues, they had low protein issues, and now vomitoxin issues on top of it, right? So you got a three-way problem, and it becomes really difficult on the farm level what to do with that grain.
Yeah, you didn't have a great price to sell it at, and now you're being hammered with all these other factors. That's not going over really well.
Yeah, there's a lot of, like I said, unfortunately, like these years is when you start going to the county level meetings, you need to start understanding their situation a little bit more. And I think we do a really good job with that, with the extension, NDSU extension. And I look forward to some of those conversations. Some of them will be tough, but it's also a good way for awareness and try to find some ways to maybe look forward into the next growing season.
I think this question may be better put towards Bethany with Irie, but I don't know if you know, or Bridgette, is this something that would fall into a category of crop insurance if you get hit on high proteins, lower yield, and vomitoxin deductions from the final, say, whatever you were going to get from that crop? I mean, some people had record yield on crop, but because of all the deductions, the prices being low, they're making less money than they had prior years growing less yield.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can't safely say I would have the answer for that, but I do know that scab has been brought up as far as being detrimental to a crop or zeroing out a crop in the past. Now, with the new, what some of the new programs or policies are out there, I don't have a good pulse on that, but right. I know there's plenty of resources out there that probably could be found.
Right, Bridgette, I don't know if you can address that at all.
I don't think you have a lot of options when it comes to crop insurance and trying to protect yourself from disease. Crop insurance is historically a lot more about weather conditions, hail, flooding, not prevented plant acres. But by all means, we may have a listener who feels really comfortable answering that question, and we'd be happy to have them reach us. Again, 701-293-9000. That's the Red Wing shoe line. Andrew, you've been talking a lot about wheat, but is that the only disease and or crop that you work with at NDSU?
Yeah, so my research extension program, it's pretty heavy on spring wheat and barley, durum, and winter wheat, but I also work on corn as well. So I'm in the middle of corn evaluation season right now, and I think we're going to get over that worry about it if it's going to make it, right? So right now I'm just doing evaluations in the field, running some of the research, and trying to wrap that up and try to schedule some harvest here, hopefully in the next month or so.
Andrew, I have a listener from Northwest Minnesota. Let's think Hallock, Lancaster. And I know we're in North Dakota, but you do a lot of crossover work with University of Minnesota. And this grower is wondering what might be some best varieties to plant when it comes to disease resistant in spring wheat.
Yeah, so the one really good opportunity in spring wheat right now is we have a lot of varieties. I think this year I evaluated 66 spring wheat varieties in some of their variety trials, so there's plenty of diversity. I by no means memorize them all anymore. It becomes more of a challenge. But what I would invite them to do is both the University of Minnesota and North Dakota State University, they do have a hard red spring wheat variety guides that get put out. And in these guides, you're going to have disease scores for every economic disease that can hit spring wheat. And scab or fusarium head blight is the one that often is referred to. And if you want to help try to understand the data, pick a variety that's 5 or less. That's going to be your best bet for getting resistance. And there's plenty of them out there. It's all depends on availability and then weighing the other things such as yield too, right? Being able to find that variety that best fits their farm.
Well, and I think that'll be an interesting challenge going into next year. Folks tend to really farm for last year and think about, well, what was my disease pressure like? So how can I avoid that problem next year? So I think those more tolerant varieties or more resistant varieties are going to go first. And that maybe depends also on if we can finally get a little bit better price for what we've got. But yeah, it's going to make some impacts on everybody's production ideas for 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a popular topic. It just become increasingly more popular, I think, as we get into the winter months here.
I'm not sure if we can completely answer this between us, Andrew, here, but when taking into the elevator, we know that vomitoxin can literally cause humans and animals to vomit. But when we talk about that, is that the only deduction that someone can be getting at the elevator? Can it slip past the elevator and make it into like a Miller or a Baker and cause further problems. I guess probably the question here is, what's the major reason for the deduction? And it's probably just the score of too much vomitoxin at the time it's brought in, is my guess.
Yeah, most of it's going to be based off a chemical assay that's going to be able to determine a level, and you're based off that level as far as what that grain load is. The reason, like I said, I kind of opened the show with this, but like the 2 part per million is kind of the happy number, because at a milling level, knowing that they can remove some of where the Fusarium fungus is at, and you can remove almost up to 50% to get it to 1 part per million. But that's not as clear and black and white in every situation either.
Farming is not clear in black and white. You have to really look for the right resolutions every chance you get. All right. One more question for you from a listener. Do you want some more research places? I have a feeling they felt like they had a high propensity for Fusarium this year. If you'd like to go use their farm.
Always open. Send me an email. Give me a call. We love doing on-farm research, being able to figure out what questions they have, and then be able to package that with some of the core objectives in my program. So I'm always entertain a conversation.
All right. So for those who are listening and say, well, maybe I do want to reach out to you and your program, Dr. Friskop, how can folks reach you? And, are there any other emphasis maybe you want to make sure that folks are aware of?
Yeah, to reach me, there's a couple different routes. You can go through your county extension agent, and they can get you my information pretty quickly. You can email me, andrew.j.friskop@ndsu.edu, or just Google me. I'd probably say is the easiest way to do it instead of remembering all those letters. But I think moving forward, some of the highlights or maybe lowlights is when I'm looking into the winter season here, talking about the growing season, is just remember when it comes to scab, it's not always going to be a problem. It's very episodic. You have bad years and you have some really good years. We came off of 4 fabulous years of scab-free, situations, and this year's that 1 year we're having problems. We have management tools. Encourage you to go to your listening sessions and reach out to your agronomists, ag professionals, crop consultants, extension. We can give you some of those resources.
That's why those people are there, because they do provide tremendous information. And we're very fortunate. Not every state has as robust of an extension service as we have here in North Dakota. Farmers trust you and rely on you. And thanks for all the things that you provide back for them, Andrew. It's much appreciated.
It's a teamwork. We love doing it.
All right, folks, we do want to make sure that we go through the weather and headlines just a little bit further. So we'll catch up with you just after this.
And welcome back to the program. Thanks for rejoining us. It is 1:52 on this Thursday afternoon. We'll have a rundown on your forecast coming up in just a little bit. We got some ag topics to hit first. And Bridgette, this is one we've talked about a handful of times before, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it into the future. But hoof disease in cattle. What can you tell me additionally to hoof disease?
Well, we have some areas that have had a lot of rainfall. And so when you have cows that can be in mud, maybe they get into a feedlot situation as cattle start coming home this fall, etc. You got to be really careful about their feet. Well, there's something called the hairy heel warts.
Oh, jeez.
Let that just stick in.
Holy moly.
Right there, let that stick in your head.
From vomitoxin to hairy...
Hairy heel warts.
Hairy
yes.
heel warts.
Oh, no.
You want to make sure you don't have that, Justin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was afraid he might be like taking his shoes off to double check. Okay. This in beef cattle, all right, it can also be found in dairy, starts out as bright red circular lesions between the heel bulbs. There's actually something called the heel bulb. So for those of you who need to know exactly where it is on the hoof, it's opposite the toe. You can literally Google it and see where the heel bulb is, and I can't wait to see if that's trending later today on Google. That lesion then can grow into a hairy wart as the foot tries to heal. And there can be a bacteria that gets in there and that thrives in that low oxygen environment, which mud can cause that. You can treat this with antibiotics or a foot bath. So you could literally have like a disinfectant that they walk through to try to help, because I just can't envision seeing my beef animals sitting in a spa chair with their hooves and pans soaking. So, and when you have wet conditions like that, you can even lead to hoof rot. And for those of us who've watched, and we've even had Nate the hoof trimmer on as a guest, hoof rot is real. It's like a toenail fungus out of control, except it's their whole hoof. It's really bad.
We might need to get Nate back on the program with us, talk about hoof rot.
It's been a couple years.
And other sorts of hairy warts.
Yeah. If you literally haven't looked at his YouTube stuff, it is so worth it. And really, this whole infectious hoof disease comes out during this show, the fairs and shows this time of year, because folks are really analyzing their cattle, and you got to be able to keep, looking at this stuff and see that it's good. You also got to make sure that fly control is essential, because when cattle bunch up to try to keep flies off of each other, they can stand in the same area that tamps it down into mud. If it's wet, they can step on each other and they can cause problems with their feet as well. So, as my brother-in-law says, when you have livestock, you have dead stock, and you got to do a million things to try to keep them all alive.
Is this anything, Bridgette, and I'm guessing the answer is no, like if you were out in the field, tending to the livestock, is there any way this could be transmitted to
humans?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Afraid
Take
of
your
the
shoes
hairy
off. Is that a
warts?
cloven foot?
Yeah. not at last check, no.
Hairless warts.
A lot of this. A lot of these things don't have a transfer over from species to species, if you will. So, no, but there's a lot of things to look out for in cows. I mean, you got to make sure that they got good hip structure, that they have solid feet. You watch out when they're calving to make sure that that goes smoothly. So their rations have to be good. You have to have biosecurity, and that's kind of one of our topics today, is presenting some of the diseases that can happen. And I'm gonna guess you guys didn't even think about this, but if you have livestock, you have to have a carcass disposal plan. What happens when one of those critters die? Because you don't just put them in the waste management bin and send them on down the road. That's not really how it goes. So all farms have to have that idea, and whether you're small or large, you got to know what's going to happen for biosecurity, and that's one of them.
All right. Well,
So-
what do you do if you have an animal die?
So
bury
there's
it?
a couple
Do you
different
burn
things. Some do.
Can you
You can
eat
have a
it?
pit. No, I don't think especially when you don't know what happens. Like you show up in the pen the next day and somebody's dead, you're like, well, I don't know what that was.
Let's
but
eat 'em.
Don't want to do that. Right. It seems tragic. But there are rendering companies in certain parts of the U.S. that will. There used to be a hog rendering plant in Minnesota. I don't know if they still exist, but we would occasionally see a truck going by that had dead pigs on it that was being hauled to that rendering site so that they could be broken down into pet food and so forth.
Pet food.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
This is why
And
So you told me I can't eat it, but the dog can eat it.
Yeah.
Your dog will eat anything. I've watched dogs kill a skunk and eat that. I mean, come on.
Ugh.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
You
got a
don't
good
want to be
point.
around that dog after that,
well,
but
No. I mean, I know Fido's special, and I know that many people have dogs that are great pets in their lives, but I grew up with a very different type of a dog, and they were pretty much outside, did their own thing.
I've seen the dogs eat the other dog's feces, and that just kind of ruined it. I was like, ugh. Dean, wasn't it
not
your old dog that used to do that, or was it somebody else here who had a dog that used to do that?
roll around and it's.
Well, no, they would eat it.
Yeah.
My dog, when I was growing up, used to.
Yeah.
Oh, man. It
Our
was
dogs never
disgusting.
did that, but they would roll in dead animals.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Very
They
much
would
so.
do that.
And I mean, they're animals. This isn't a Disney movie. It's what they're naturally inclined to do.
Yep. Ugh. Yeah, I don't
So-
know. It's just something's. Ugh. Yeah. Anyways, I think that's gonna wrap it up for the show today. We're glad we ended it on a banger for you. So there you go.
Welcome to I hope for those of you having late lunch are going to be okay.
This was a great lunch hour special. We might have to rename it to the
Yeah,
lunch
right.
hour special versus vomit on my wheat.
Yes, exactly.
But anyways, we're back tomorrow, 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Before we go, do you remember what a Tasmanian devil sounds like? Now you do. Have a great day.